"We don't serve your kind here. Maybe try somewhere down the street." The dining room was alive with motion. Crystal glasses chimed, silverware scraped against porcelain, and the low hum of chatter mixed with the sizzling of dishes leaving the kitchen. Waiters in crisp uniforms glided between tables, balancing plates of filet mignon and lobster tails for well-dressed couples laughing under golden chandeliers. Into this glittering atmosphere walked Marcus. His steps were quiet, his suit plain, his demeanor humble. He didn't stand out, not the way others did in their designer jackets and expensive jewelry, but there was a quiet confidence in the way he carried himself, as though nothing in the world could shake his balance. Before he could take 2 steps inside, a waitress blocked his path. She was young, sharp-eyed, and smirked like she owned the very floor she walked on. Her lips curled as she looked Marcus up and down, her voice loud enough to silence a nearby table. "We don't serve your kind here. Maybe try somewhere down the street." The words dropped like a stone into a still pond. Plates paused midair. Conversations froze. A gasp escaped from a woman at the bar. A man shifted uncomfortably in his chair, eyes darting to Marcus, then quickly away, as though being near him might invite trouble. Marcus didn't react. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He simply lowered his gaze, the quiet sting of her words heavy in the air. His calmness only magnified the cruelty of her tone. Customers leaned in to whisper, some shaking their heads in silent agreement with the waitress, others too stunned to intervene. The humiliation was raw, sharp, and deliberate. She had dismissed him without hesitation, without knowing a thing about him, without caring. And yet, just as the tension reached its peak, the narrator's voice slid into the silence. What this waitress didn't know was that Marcus wasn't here to eat. He wasn't just another customer. He owned the entire restaurant. The camera lingered on Marcus's face, his expression unreadable. In the background, the restaurant buzz returned, but now it was layered with unease. Something was about to shift. Something no one in that room was prepared for. The audience's anger is lit, the injustice is unbearable, and the revelation teaser demands they stay to see the waitress's downfall. Marcus Johnson was not the kind of man who needed to prove himself with flash or noise. In his world, true power was the ability to walk into any room and not need to announce who you were. He had built companies from the ground up, employing hundreds, mentoring dozens more, and quietly pouring his fortune into charities and community programs that bore no name but his fingerprint. Yet tonight he chose something simple: a plain navy jacket, shoes that had seen better days, and no entourage. To the untrained eye, he looked like just another middle-class man hoping for a good meal in a place that prided itself on exclusivity. The waitress, however, saw none of his history, none of his dignity. To her, Marcus was only what she believed she saw. Her name was Karen. Sharp smile, sharper tongue, the type who judged people within seconds. To her, appearances told the whole story. Designer watches meant wealth. Plain jackets meant mediocrity. And skin color, in her mind, was a ticket to exclusion. She leaned against the counter, her voice pitched just high enough for the room to hear, dripping with superiority. "This isn't the kind of place for just anyone. We have standards here." Her words were barbed, delivered like poison in sugar. At a corner table, a couple exchanged glances. The man muttered, "Maybe she's right. He doesn't look like he belongs here." Another diner whispered, "He probably wandered in by mistake." The murmurs spread like wildfire, small judgments fueled by prejudice, none of them realizing who they were speaking about. But Marcus stood silently, hands folded loosely in front of him. His face betrayed no anger, no flare of temper. There was only stillness, an inner calm forged through years of being underestimated, dismissed, and yet always rising above it. His silence wasn't weakness. It was power contained. Karen, mistaking restraint for submission, pressed harder. "Sir, I don't know where you came from, but this isn't a charity kitchen. I won't embarrass you further. Please leave before you make a scene." Her smirk widened as if she had just put him in his place. The irony was lost on her. She thought she was the one in control, the gatekeeper of who deserved fine dining and who didn't. What she didn't realize was that the ground beneath her feet already belonged to Marcus. Around them, tension thickened. Customers leaned closer, watching as though it were a spectacle. Some shook their heads in disapproval at Marcus's presence, others at Karen's cruelty. But no one moved to stop her. It was easier to spectate than intervene. Marcus lifted his eyes finally, meeting hers with a look so steady it unsettled her for just a flicker of a moment. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself, didn't raise his voice to match hers. And that silence, that refusal to react the way she expected, was the first crack in the illusion she thought she held. The stage was set. One woman drunk on her own prejudice, one man too powerful to need to prove a thing. The audience could feel it. Justice wasn't here yet, but it was coming. And when it did, it would be devastating. The injustice cuts deep. The audience's anger builds, and their craving for the justice payoff grows stronger with every second. Karen's sneer hardened, her voice dripping with disdain as she folded her arms. "We don't serve freeloaders here. Out before I call security." She raised her chin, her words ringing with confidence as if she had delivered a final verdict. The restaurant murmured with low laughter from a few tables. Diners leaned closer, whispering behind their menus, eager to see the scene unfold. Marcus stood in the center of it all, silent for a long beat, his gaze calm, almost serene. Finally he spoke, his voice low but clear, carrying a weight that cut through the noise. "Are you sure about that?" Karen blinked, thrown off by the simple question. Then she barked out a laugh and gestured for another waiter to join her, a lanky young man with a nervous smile. "You hear that? He thinks he's clever." She turned back to Marcus, her tone mocking. "What's he going to do, huh? Pay with pocket change? Maybe he's saving up for a cup of coffee." The young waiter chuckled awkwardly, not daring to contradict her. Karen smirked, convinced the room was on her side. A couple of diners chuckled uncomfortably, but others shifted in their seats, sensing something different in Marcus's composure. Before Marcus could respond, a man in a black vest hurried forward, the restaurant manager, face pale with tension. He forced a smile, but sweat glistened at his temples. "Excuse me, sir," he said to Marcus in a hushed voice, trying not to make a scene. "Perhaps we can sort this out quietly. If you'd like, I can recommend another establishment nearby." Karen smirked wider, satisfied. "See, even the manager agrees. This place isn't for everyone." The audience, the diners, the staff, and the viewers of this story felt the sting. The humiliation was sharp, deliberate, and public. And yet Marcus did not flinch. He did not match her venom with anger, nor her arrogance with protest. Instead, he took in the faces around him, some amused, some indifferent, some ashamed of their silence. Then, with deliberate calm, Marcus finally spoke. His words landed like thunder in the quiet dining room. "Interesting," he said, his eyes sweeping the room slowly, deliberately, making sure no one could escape his gaze. "So this is how my staff treats guests." Gasps cut through the air. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Forks froze halfway to mouths. The manager's face drained of color and his mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came. Karen blinked, confused, then scoffed, trying to laugh it off. "Your staff? What are you talking about?" She chuckled nervously, glancing at the others for support. "This man's delusional. He thinks he owns the place now," but her laugh rang hollow. There was something in Marcus's tone, steady, unwavering, authoritative, that made even the skeptics shift uncomfortably in their seats. A ripple of unease spread across the restaurant, and the suspense tightened like a noose. Everyone could feel it. Something big was about to break. Marcus hasn't revealed his identity yet, but with one calm sentence, the power dynamic has shifted. The audience leans in, desperate to see Karen's smirk crumble. Karen threw her head back and laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. "Your staff? Please, don't waste my time." She turned to a nearby table as if inviting them to laugh with her. A couple of diners chuckled nervously, though more out of discomfort than agreement. She turned back to Marcus, smirking. "If you really had staff here, don't you think they'd know who you are?" Marcus didn't blink. His calm unsettled her more than anger ever could. He simply said, "Then call your general manager." Karen's smirk faltered for just a moment, but she waved her hand dismissively. "Fine, if it'll get you out of here faster." She snapped her fingers toward a busboy. "Go fetch the GM. Tell him we've got a situation." The room was thick with tension now, diners whispering. Some pulled out their phones, recording discreetly, sensing something remarkable was unfolding. The busboy disappeared into the back. Moments later, the door to the kitchen swung open, and the general manager rushed out, adjusting his tie and muttering apologies under his breath. But then he saw Marcus. And everything changed. The manager froze mid-step, his face draining of color. His posture snapped upright, his eyes wide with shock. "Sir, Mr. Johnson, I wasn't expecting you tonight." His voice trembled, caught between awe and panic. The air seemed to vanish from the room. Diners gasped, heads whipping from the manager to Marcus. The staff exchanged stunned looks. Karen blinked in disbelief, her confident smirk collapsing into open-mouthed confusion. She turned to the manager, voice rising. "Wait, what? You know him?" The manager's gaze didn't leave Marcus. "Of course I know him," he said quietly, reverently. "This is Mr. Johnson. He owns this restaurant." A collective intake of breath rippled through the dining room. Forks clattered against plates. Conversations died mid-word. Phones were no longer hidden. They were out in the open, recording every second. Karen stumbled back a step, her face paling as the realization crashed over her. No, that can't be. He was just... She looked around desperately. But the eyes staring back at her were no longer laughing with her. They were condemning her. Marcus remained still, his expression unreadable, his calm presence radiating more authority than any raised voice ever could. The narrator's voice sliced into the silence, heavy with inevitability. And in that moment, she realized the man she insulted didn't just belong there. He owned everything. The audience is locked in, waiting to see how Marcus will deliver justice. The silence in the restaurant was suffocating, thick with the weight of revelation. Every eye was locked on Marcus, the man who had just been mocked, dismissed, and humiliated, now revealed as the very owner of the glittering establishment. He turned slowly, his gaze sweeping across the staff lined along the walls and the diners frozen mid-bite. His voice, when it came, was steady and deliberate, carrying the authority of a man who didn't need to shout to command attention. "Hospitality," Marcus began, "is about dignity, about respect. People don't come here just for fine food or polished silverware. They come because they expect to be treated like human beings. What I just witnessed..." He paused, his words slicing through the still air. "Shames this place." Whispers erupted immediately. Customers leaned toward one another, phones raised high, recording every second. "He owns it." One woman hissed in disbelief. "That's the owner." Another whispered, eyes wide. The ripple spread like electricity. The sound of dozens of shocked voices layered over the steady hum of recording devices. Karen's smirk was gone. Her face flushed, her hands trembled as she tried to muster her earlier bravado. I was just joking," she stammered, forcing a laugh that landed flat. "It was, just a bit of fun. No harm meant." Marcus's eyes locked on her, calm yet unyielding. "A joke." He tilted his head slightly, his tone sharp without raising a decibel. "Tell me, is dignity a joke to you? Or do you think prejudice is part of our menu?" The words landed like a slap, echoed by a few scattered gasps from the crowd. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came. Her lips quivered, and her eyes darted toward the other staff for backup, but they had all stepped back, unwilling to side with her now. The general manager cleared his throat, bowing his head slightly. "Mr. Johnson, I assure you this isn't representative of how we operate." Marcus held up a hand, silencing him instantly. "Tonight," he said, his voice cutting through the whispers like a blade, "this restaurant revealed its true face. And the truth is never hidden. It's exposed by moments like these." He turned to Karen. "You assumed that because I dressed simply, because of the color of my skin, that I didn't belong. You didn't see a guest. You saw someone beneath you, and you made sure the world knew it." Karen's eyes filled with panic now. "Please, I didn't mean..." But Marcus didn't allow her to finish. He took a step closer, his presence towering over her though his voice remained calm. "This establishment was built on the belief that respect is not optional. It is mandatory. Every single person who walks through those doors deserves to feel welcome. You robbed someone of that tonight. Me, your own employer." The weight of his words rippled through the room. Diners shifted uncomfortably, some nodding in agreement, others whispering, "He's right." Phones captured the moment. The power dynamic flipped completely on its head. Karen, desperate, tried again. I can explain." Marcus shook his head slowly. "No explanation can erase what you've shown us. This isn't about me, Karen. It's about every person you've ever dismissed. Every guest you made feels small. Tonight, it ends." The crowd was silent now, every diner holding their breath waiting for his decision. Karen looked around wildly, realizing for the first time she was utterly alone. Even the young waiter she had laughed with earlier had his eyes cast down, ashamed. Marcus turned back to the diners, his voice addressing them as much as her. A restaurant's reputation isn't built by chandeliers or wine lists. It's built by the way people are treated when no one is watching. Tonight, everyone was watching, and the world will see exactly who we are after this moment. The tension was unbearable. The audience at home and in the restaurant itself leaned forward, desperate for resolution. Would he fire her on the spot? Would he humiliate her as she humiliated him? Marcus's final words before the pause cut through the air, leaving the cliffhanger hanging like a blade. "So, tell me, Karen, what place does prejudice have in a restaurant that bears my name?" Justice is circling, but Marcus hasn't dropped the hammer yet. The suspense is agonizing. Viewers must keep watching to see her downfall. The moment stretched like an eternity. Karen's trembling hands clutched her apron, her eyes darting between Marcus and the silent crowd that now bore witness to her undoing. For the first time that night, she realized the weight of her words, the gravity of her arrogance. Marcus exhaled slowly, then turned to the general manager. "Call security," he said evenly, his tone final. "Escort her out. Permanently." The manager froze for a beat, then nodded, signaling to two uniformed guards stationed near the entrance. The restaurant, once filled with the soft clink of cutlery and hum of conversation, now vibrated with hushed whispers as diners leaned in to capture every detail on their phones. Karen staggered back a step. "Wait, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "I need this job. I've got bills, rent. This was a mistake, I swear." Her hands shook as she tried to reach toward Marcus, but he didn't flinch. Marcus's gaze was calm but unrelenting. "So did every person you ever humiliated with your words," he replied, his voice steady and sharp as steel. "So did every customer who walked out of here carrying the sting of your contempt. They needed dignity, just as you claim you need this job. The difference." He paused, letting the silence bite. "I believe in second chances, just not here." The guard stepped forward, gently but firmly taking her by the arms. Karen's protests grew louder, frantic now. "Please! You don't understand, I was just—" "Enough," Marcus said quietly, cutting her off with a look that froze her in place. "This isn't about me anymore. It's about what kind of place this restaurant will be from this moment on. And people like you don't belong in the vision I built." As the guards guided her toward the door, the room erupted, not in chaos, but in quiet applause. At first, a few customers clapped hesitantly, then more joined in, until the sound swelled into a wave of approval. Some even cheered softly, relief and admiration mingling in the air. Diners who had witnessed injustice transformed into participants in her public reckoning. Karen's voice cracked over the rising sound. "Please don't do this to me." But no one moved to her defense. Not the staff, not the customers, not even the manager. She was utterly alone. The finality of the moment hit her like a blow. The doors swung shut behind her, and the applause lingered for a few beats before subsiding into awed silence. All eyes turned back to Marcus. He stood tall, not triumphant, not smug, simply resolute. He waited until the quiet returned, then spoke, his voice carrying to every corner of the dining hall. "This place was never meant to be just another restaurant," he said. "It was meant to be a home for dignity, for respect, for people to share food without fear of being judged by their skin, their clothes, or their story. Tonight, we were all reminded of how fragile that vision is, and how fiercely it must be protected." The crowd hung on his words. Some diners lowered their heads, others nodded, tears welling in their eyes as the weight of his message sank in. Phones continued to record, but for once, the technology felt secondary. Everyone present knew they were living a moment that would ripple far beyond these walls. And then, with perfect timing, the narrator's voice broke through like a drumbeat. But Marcus wasn't finished. He had one more message for everyone watching. Viewers stay hooked to hear his bigger message, ensuring retention into the next segment. The clip hit the internet before Karen even made it home. Diners who had been secretly recording uploaded it within minutes, and by the time the last dessert was served that night, the video was already trending on 3 different platforms. The title varied depending on who shared it, but the message was always the same: Owner humbles racist waitress. By morning, millions had seen it. Short edits circulated like wildfire. Karen sneering, "We don't serve your kind here," immediately followed by the general manager addressing Marcus as Mr. Johnson. The collective gasp from the crowd replayed in loops across TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. Memes popped up overnight. Marcus standing firm with captions like, "Respect, it's always on the menu," or "He didn't raise his voice, but he raised the standard." What struck people most wasn't just the twist, that the man she had mocked owned the entire restaurant. It was how Marcus handled it. No shouting, no revenge-laden rant. Just calm, unshakable authority that dismantled prejudice with a single decision. Comments poured in by the thousands. "This is how you handle hate, with dignity." I hope every business owner watches this. He didn't just save his restaurant's reputation, he redefined it. Within days, national news outlets picked it up. Reporters camped outside the restaurant eager to interview Marcus. He declined the spotlight at first, but eventually gave one statement that echoed everywhere. "Respect is non-negotiable. If my restaurant isn't a home for every guest, then it isn't worthy of being open at all." Inside the restaurant, changes came swiftly. Marcus called an emergency staff meeting the very next morning. Standing at the same spot where Karen had tried to humiliate him, he addressed everyone with the same calm strength he'd shown the night before. "From today forward," he said, "this place will be more than fine dining. It will be a standard. Every person who walks in deserves dignity, whether they're wearing a suit or overalls, whether they're black, white, rich, poor. That is not a suggestion. That is the law of this house." He announced mandatory retraining for the entire team, a new code of respect written into their employment contracts. Any repeat of discrimination, even in tone, would mean immediate termination. The staff, shaken by what they had witnessed, nodded solemnly. Some even thanked him afterward, realizing they too had judged guests in small, unspoken ways. The restaurant's reputation soared. People traveled from across the city, then across the country, just to experience it. Not just for the food, but for what it symbolized. A place where humanity mattered as much as hospitality. Bloggers called it a beacon of inclusion. Influencers posted videos of themselves dining there, proud to be part of the movement. Bookings skyrocketed. Marcus's establishment wasn't just surviving the scandal, it was thriving. But for Karen, the aftermath was a mirror she couldn't escape. Her name spread online with the video. Job applications were denied before interviews even began. Her reputation preceded her everywhere. She tried rebranding herself, shaving down her social profiles, but the internet never forgets. In forums and reviews, her sneer became shorthand for arrogance and prejudice. Once she had strutted across the restaurant floor, convinced she could size people up at a glance. Now she stood in grocery lines avoiding eye contact, praying no one recognized her. But they often did. Whispers followed her like shadows. That's the waitress from the video. The cruel irony wasn't lost on the world. She had believed Marcus didn't belong in his own restaurant. Now, she was the one locked out of the industry entirely, her arrogance costing her the very livelihood she claimed to protect. Meanwhile, Marcus remained unchanged in demeanor, but the world changed around him. Invitations poured in from hospitality conferences, diversity panels, even leadership summits. He wasn't just a restaurateur anymore. He had become a voice, a quiet but commanding advocate for respect in all industries. And through it all, the video continued to spread, replaying that fateful moment for millions more. Each time someone watched it, they weren't just seeing a waitress put in her place. They were watching a lesson. Prejudice defeated not with rage, but with dignity. The restaurant became a symbol. Marcus became an icon. and Karen became a warning, emotional catharsis delivered. Viewers feel the justice ripple beyond the restaurant walls, fueling shares and comments. The seasons had shifted since that unforgettable night, but the memory lived on in every corner of the city. The restaurant that had once been just another upscale dining spot was now a landmark, a symbol of dignity, respect, and justice served in more ways than one. Outside its entrance, a brand new billboard towered over the bustling street. It showed Marcus Johnson standing tall in a tailored suit, his expression calm and resolute. Beneath him, in bold letters, were the words that had become his legacy. Respect is always on the menu. People stopped to take photos beneath it, some smiling proudly, others pausing in thought. For many, it wasn't just an ad. It was a reminder, a call to treat others better than society often teaches us to. The narrator's voice resonated as the image lingered. Privilege isn't power. Wealth isn't power. True power is how you treat others when you think no one is watching. The story might have ended there for most, but fate had one more scene in store. On an ordinary afternoon, Marcus exited a meeting downtown, his steps steady, his presence as unshakable as ever. And there she was, Karen. Her once proud posture had withered, her clothes rumpled, her eyes carrying the heaviness of months spent living with the consequences of her choices. She froze when she saw him, guilt and shame written across her face. For a moment, she hesitated. Then, gathering her courage, she whispered, "Mr. Johnson, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, for everything." Marcus looked at her, his expression unreadable. Seconds passed like hours. Then he gave a small nod, his voice calm, measured, and impossibly gracious. "You reminded me why this fight still matters," he said. "And for that, I thank you. No anger, no resentment. Just a quiet acknowledgement that even the harshest prejudice can be turned into fuel for something greater." Karen lowered her eyes, unable to meet his gaze, and walked away, carrying the weight of her past, while Marcus carried the strength of having turned it into purpose. The camera lingered on him as he adjusted his jacket, glanced up at the billboard towering above, and moved on with quiet dignity. The narrator's closing words settled over the final frame. "Success is the only revenge worth having." Fade to black. Then, the on-screen prompt appears, pulling the audience into the story's echo. Have you ever been underestimated, judged or disrespected, only to prove people wrong? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe for more inspiring real-life stories.